Okay, so verse 7, we have a first class, okay, de. We're going to translate this as transitional now. And then we have first class condition, a, if, and with the indicative, we have the indicative mood down here in Genomite, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. If, and it's true. If, and it's true for the sake of argument. If, and now they're the nominative of diakonia. We saw the cognate of this one. We saw diakonos, a minister. So diakonia is the noun meaning a minister. I mean the ministry. If the ministry, what is it? This is the old covenant. If the ministry, and we have a descriptive genitive of thanato, if the ministry of death. And what does this mean, the ministry of death? As you can see, the NIV translated that brought death. Because of our previous verse in verse 6, it says that the law, the letter kills. So how did it bring death? How does it kill? It lets you know, the law lets you know that you are a sinner. Just as we saw in Romans chapter 7. Let me go over that one again. Romans chapter 7, verse 7. What shall we say then? Well, where are we? Okay. What shall we say then? Is the law sinful? Certainly not. Nevertheless, I would not have known what sin was had it not been for the law. So it defines sin for us. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, you shall not covet. And now, so he found out also, though, about the lust of his sin nature. And so he understood that here's the commandment, here's the sin, thou shalt not. And between the sin, the commandment, and the sin nature is what? Lust, coveting, power lust, approbation lust, monetary lust, etc. So the commandment, thou shalt not lust, it lets you know, it tells you about this, the sin nature inside of you. The connection between the commandment and the sin nature is lust as the motivator, arrogant lust. And so by this, he found out that he was a sinner. It killed him at that moment because he gained cognizance of him being a sinner. I would not have known what sin was had it not been for the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, you shall not covet, lust, you shall not lust. But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced in me every kind of lust. For apart from the law, sin was dead. So he would, even though he was spiritually dead, but the sin had no power. The sin nature had no power. The moment that he gained cognizance about the commandment and that he was a sinner, the sin nature exploited the commandment and produced even more lusts. You want an example how to do that? Here's the law, righteous standard. And so you cannot meet that perfect righteous standard. It lets you know that you're a sinner. And so the next day you also get up and you try to fulfill the law through your own works and say that you're a little bit more successful than yesterday. You produce these amount of works, this amount of obedience, and now it produces a sense of self-sufficiency, arrogance in you, self-righteousness in you. And so now instead of you being worried about you becoming a sinner, you have gravitated to the other side of the sin nature, and now it produces self-righteousness. Whereas before that, okay, I'm a sinner, and now you gravitated to self-righteousness. And so this is one of the ways that the sin nature has exploited the law. You gravitate between knowing that you're a sinner, being unworthy, and self-righteousness. So this is one of those great ways that the sin nature has exploited the law. But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced in me every kind of lust. For apart from and there's a lot more lusts in there. For apart from the law, sin was dead. So sin had no power apart from the law. The sin nature had no power, rather. Once I was alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, the sin nature sprang to life and I died. This is gaining cognizance of you being a sinner. So this is the ministry that kills. I found that the very commandment that was intended to bring life actually brought death. Because the commandment is not to bring life, it's meant to let you know that you are a sinner. And then Codex number 2 points to the solution. That's what brings life. But the very commandment is what lets you know that you are a sinner. So it brings more death. For sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, deceived me, and through the commandment put me to death. This is cognizance of you being a sinner, and it puts you more enmeshed, gets you more enmeshed in the sin nature. So then the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good. Okay. So 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7. Now if the ministry that brought death, now do you understand? The ministry of death, this descriptive genitive can be translated that brought death. It points back to verse 6. The law kills. If the ministry of death, and now we have a, what is it? Where are we? Okay, yeah, we have a participle right here of entupoo, and tetupomene. And so this is the perfect passive participle of entupoo. This means to carve, like on tablets of stone. This is permanent, by the way. The law is permanent, and nothing was going to be removed until the Lord Jesus Christ fulfilled it. The word that we have up here, written in hearts of stone, do you remember this one, verse 3? Verse 3 is, you know that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, and this is inscribed. But this one is not permanent. In other words, as you're advancing, so this, your heart is your letter, obviously, and as you learn more doctrine, you receive more doctrine inside of it. But nothing guarantees that you're going to keep that doctrine inside of you, that letter is going to remain the same. The only thing that determines whether you're going to have that writing the way it is or add even more is by you being consistent and learning doctrine. Because let me tell you right now, if you stop using 1 John 1:9 and learning under your pastor teacher, this letter is going to change. The inscription, this word, and where is it again? I'm sorry, let me look at the Greek. Here we are, engegramene, engrapho. This is not permanent. This inscription can change. If you stop using 1 John 1:9 and learning doctrine, this is going to change. We do take it to heaven, obviously. Once you die, you do take the letter up to heaven. But before you die, and if you stop using 1 John 1:9 and all that nothing promises that the letter is going to remain the same. So these inscriptions are not permanent. And now it uses a different word in verse 7. It uses entupoo, and this is carving. This is true. This is the letter of the commandment, and it doesn't change. It's permanent. It's never going to change. It's going to just waiting for the Lord Jesus Christ to fulfill it, and he did fulfill it. So carved, having been carved, we're just going to translate it carved or engraved, yes, carved, and then n plus the dative of manner of grammasin, and we're going to translate it with letters, engraved with letters, carved with letters, engraved with letters, rather. The perfect tense is the intensive perfect, going back to the completed action of the letters being engraved by God on the tablets when Moses was in the mountain of Sinai. But the results continue, that those letters remain carved inside on those tablets. The passive voice, it's the tablets receive, the diaconia, the content of the ministry, receives the action of the verb of being carved on those tablets, and the participle is circumstantial, which expresses the attendant circumstances of the main verb. Okay, so carved with letters, and we have a dative of location, lithois, and the dative plural, on stones. We're going to translate it on stones. On stones. Finally, we've come to the main verb, egenete. This is the aorist passive indicative of ginomai. It means become. Become. You translate it in the NIV, they translate it came with glory. But the real meaning is become. And then n plus doxa, n plus the dative of doxa, dative of manner, with glory, came with glory. And so we have a lot to go over here right now. First of all, let's look at the verb, aorist tense, and this is the culminative aorist. collecting into one entirety the moment that the law came with glory, but emphasizing from the results. The results is that it taught something about God's essence, and it also had a manifestation. The manifestation was the splendor on Moses' face. The passive voice, the passive voice, yes, the diakonia receives the action of the verb. It became with glory. And the indicative mood, this is for the reality that the old ministry did have some glory. Now, why is it egenete? Why become? Ginomai means to become something that you are not. It's because the old ministry, its glory, is not permanent. It is not permanent. What does it mean by that? Is that the law was about to be replaced. The law only pointed to the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. But once the real thing, the real reality, the Lord Jesus Christ came, the law was going to be moved aside. And then would come the new covenant. This is why it uses the word become, because the glory was transitory.